Hey there, good morning. It is Monday, Martin Luther King Day. So I would like to read an excerpt from his speech. That is his 1968 speech he gave on April 3rd, which ends up being the very last speech he gives. The part I'm going to read references his stabbing in 1958. So this is one of my favorite parts of his speech. You know, several years ago, I was in New York City autographing the first book that I had written. And while sitting there autographing books, a demented black woman came up. The only question I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And as I was looking down writing, and I said yes, and the next minute I felt something beating on my chest. And before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. It came out in the New York Times the next morning that if I had sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me, after the operation, after my chest had been opened and the blade had been taken out, to move about in a wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that had come in from all over the states and all over the world. Kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I had received one from the president and the vice president. I've forgotten those telegrams. And I had received a visit from the governor of New York, but I had forgotten what the letter said. But there was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter and I will never forget it. It simply said, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School." She said, "And while it should not matter, I would like to mention I am a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and your suffering, and I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. And I am simply writing to say to you that I am happy you didn't sneeze." It's my favorite one. It goes on to say a lot more. It's a great speech. It also turns out that he misremembers that. It's actually a 37-year-old woman named Jean Kepler who wrote in the letter, not a student, but it doesn't matter. It's powerful. Today's weather, lots of sun, kind of cold. Get outside, do something fun. And what could you do today if you didn't sneeze?